So welcome back to Be More Super. This is the first interview of 2025, and what a way to kick it off by this awesome film. We've got the writer and director, Jonathan Bowen, and he wrote and directed The Comic Shop, which I've actually watched twice now because I actually really enjoyed it. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Wow, that's awesome. You've seen it twice.
Oh, you know what? When I really like a film, I like to watch it twice because there's lots of hidden Easter eggs and you miss a few pieces along the way, and it's quite nice to watch it. And then even after the second time, it's reconfirmed what a great movie this is, because I resonate with the lead character quite a lot, and it's a very emotional in places, funny in places. But it's got a great message that you leave this film with, which we're going to talk about. So let's talk about first of all, whereabouts are you calling in from?
Oh, I'm just outside of Las Vegas. I'm in Henderson, Nevada.
So nice and warm then, because here in the UK, we don't get the warm. We just get wind, rain, a bit of fog, but no, that's great. Isn't modern technology fantastic? You're coming in from all the way from Vegas. So let's talk about the film. So what inspired you to take the real life story of Mike that you knew and give it a second chance through this movie?
Yeah, so the real life Mike was kind of a jumping off point. I did know a Mike, and he owned a comic store, and things kind of fizzled out. But I blended that with sort of a lot of my personality and experiences as well, where I was also and am running a company that does corporate video work. And it's not my passion, but it's a way to pay the bills. And it had been, more than a decade between my first film and getting a chance to do the comic shop. So I was also kind of feeling like this character, Mike, where time is passing by and I'm not really doing my plan A, my passion. And, maybe I was like kind of losing a little bit of zest for life, and in the movie, then he meets a younger guy, Brandon, who sort of helps pull him out of this. And in some ways, Brandon was supposed to be the younger me, like the more optimistic, enthusiastic, like he's not going to be, taken down by the world, or at least in his mind, he isn't, because he hasn't met the challenges yet that you face. But
I mean, this movie is like, I always look at an indie movie like making a cake. And you've got to have the right ingredients and the right proportions, and together it makes a great finished article. And I love this film in the way that there's no, for me, main character. I think every character has its part in playing this great sort of machine, and it's great to see the cameos that come into this film, which we will talk about, because one of them I've had on my show and is an absolute legend. But how much of yourself is in the characters of Mike and Brandon then when writing this? How much of you is in them, and how much of you don't want to put in them? Because obviously if you're writing it can be quite a personal project. So where is that line where you draw when writing a film?
There was quite a bit of me in them. Like, I mean, even, I don't really talk about it that much, but even some of Mike's like struggles with alcohol, it's like a boredom thing. I mean, I had periods of time where, I would, maybe drink a little more than I wanted to. Like, never like serious problem. Just more like I was bored and was like, okay, let's have some drinks, And so that's kind of Mike. I wanted to show him as somebody who, like, he's not an alcoholic. He just gets bored at work because he just doesn't care. And then he goes across the street, to the local bar and has a couple brews. So I try to put in quite a bit of myself into the characters, but at the same time, I switched, obviously what they're interested in. Like, they're illustrators and they love comics. I actually don't know that much about comics. Like, I grew up with comics as a kid and I loved them. But as an adult, it wasn't something that I knew as much about. So I had to do more research for the script. And I can barely even write my own name well. So I never wanted to be an illustrator. I always wanted to be a film.
But
But
you know what? In the UK, we don't really have comic shops, which is really bizarre. So watching this film is just fascinating because I went to Chicago in April to C2E2, which is a big convention, and
yeah.
literally I lost my mind in the comic book like aisles for with all the artists. And I think that you can just see behind me I've actually got a comic book, a Superman one, where I met the artist and got him to sign it, and I got it slabbed and everything like that.
Oh,
But
nice.
yeah, it's a very deep sort of dive you've got to go in the comic book world because it's so fast, it's so big. So why choose a comic book shop for this film and not something else?
Yeah, I mean, that part really was just kind of inspired by like my time growing up, in the 80s and 90s and going to comic shops. Uh, do I still
Oh,
have you?
oh, yeah. You just froze for a second. So yeah, so I
Oh,
just
okay.
asked, the role, why a comic book shop and why not something
Yeah.
else?
Yeah, I think that part was really just inspired by the real life experience of being a kid, going to comic shops, and being really excited. And since the script, the jumping off point was really to look at this guy Mike and reimagine what his ending would be like, and also to be able to look at it and think, what drove this guy? Why was he losing his passion for work? That was kind of part of it as well.
I mean, talking about obviously comic book shops and everything, you are clearly what they call a geek because from behind you, I can clearly see it. Maybe a Nintendo behind you there. On is that a Nintendo? I can't see,
Yeah,
but
I have
yeah.
the little mini consoles, the like where they have the built-in games and stuff like that. So I've got all the minis there. I think it's like Nintendo. There's the SNES, the mini PlayStation. That's kind of like the retro gaming TV. I don't use it a lot, but it's in the office in case there's a bored moment.
Yes, it's better that than the drink. But I mean, obviously, doing your
Yeah.
research for the comic book world, what was the biggest thing that you learned? What was the thing that you thought, wow, when you was doing all your research?
Yeah, so I had a lot of fun doing some of the research before the script. I went to a couple of comic stores and I kind of told them, look, please point me in the direction of like some indie comics that you like, not Marvel, not DC, like something sort of weird and off the beaten path. And so the guy, he liked it because he doesn't get that question a lot. And so he kind of gave me a stack of comics that were, um, you know, not what we would think about as comics. Like a couple of them, they don't have any superheroes. They're just illustrated comics or graphic novels. Paper Girls was one of them, which Amazon ended up making into a big series years later. So I guess it's not so indie after all, But at the time,
Damn it, they've
that's how
took
it
it and
started.
they've ruined it. They've taken it from the indie status and now commercialized it. But that's
Yeah,
but that's what I
exactly.
love about anything indie. I always find that anything indie, if it's films, if it's comics, you just get a sense that there's so much more love and care that's taken within that project because you haven't got these giant studio bosses telling you what you can and can't do. And that's what I love about indie movies because the stories are told as they were intended to be, which which
Right.
which is great. I mean, in this film, you've got a comic book called Techno Man. How did that come
Yes.
about? How was that thought about and brought to the screen?
That is interesting. So I knew I wanted to make this fake character, and I wanted his superpower to be somehow relevant to our characters, like something that at least Brandon, our younger character, could really identify with. So I gave him a superpower of being able to teleport between like any two digital devices as long as they had some sort of signal. And as a military brat who was always moving around, and I imagine left friends behind in each place that his family, dragged him from. I thought that was something that would really appeal to him. Aside from crime fighting or whatever, he wishes he could just go visit his friends at a moment's notice and then come back to reality. And so I thought like this could be kind of a fun character, and yeah, it's kind of a weird superpower. But if it's an indie book, it can be weird. That's fine. And so I had a lot of fun with creating Technoman, and it was really interesting because the guy that I chose to illustrate the Technoman covers and the inside artwork, he was kind of like a real life Mike. So he had worked at Walmart. I think he was like an assistant manager, and he decided that he was going to quit his job and pursue doing comic illustrating full time. Like he had just made that decision, I think, like 6 months earlier. And so then when I hired him to do it, I thought, well, this movie is right up your alley. You pretty much are the main character in a lot of ways.
It's like a full circle moment. And I've got to ask as well, in the film, obviously, when they do a sign-in in the actual shop and you have Jimmy Fallon, is that based on a certain character, a real life person, or is that just a complete? Because the name sort of, goes along the lines of a real life, comic book person.
Yeah. So that was I gave him the name from Todd McFarlane.
Yeah, that's what I was guessing.
Creator of Spawn and all that, and a little part of that was also because when my parents were looking to custom build a home in Portland, Oregon, they actually went on a tour of his house. They did the whole like pretend to be buyers thing, and so they have. This is what's weird to me is that I guess he was there for it. And I've sold a lot of houses. I've never been there. I let the agent deal with it, and I leave the house. But he was there, and he gave my parents a stack of Spawn numbers 1 through 5. And of course, I think I was like 12 or so, but I loved it. And getting these comics like right from the creator, I thought was just the coolest thing in the world. And of course, my parents were such like, boomers that they had no clue. They're like, oh, I guess this guy does some comics or whatever. And I was like, Todd McFarlane is a legend. Like, you met him? And so it didn't mean anything to them, but to me it was really cool. So I thought, I'd love to honor that and make like a character who has a name that I think a lot of comic fans might sort of like, you wonder if it has something to do with that. Although his personality is completely, that was partially created by the actor who is absolutely hilarious. And I don't think I wrote it quite like that, but as we, got on scene, it's like, okay, so Jimmy is a raging alcoholic.
This is what I was thinking. I was thinking, poor Todd. He's probably thinking, how do they know? Or how dare they?
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, we only see this guy Jimmy twice, and he's drinking heavily in like both of the scenes. So
yes, yeah, definitely the coffee cup trick.
Yeah,
I mean, for this film, I've interviewed quite a few indie directors, and there's a pattern between all of you in the way that you don't get much time to actually film your projects. And this film was over, if I'm right in saying, 15 days.
Yeah,
where
that's right.
I think is absolutely incredible. So how much pre-work is done and how stressful is that, putting everything together over those 15 days?
Oh, yeah, it's really stressful. There's so little time that there's not a lot of room for error. When you have a mistake that happens, like we had a setback on day one with camera issues, and thankfully we got the whole scene, but when we turned around and filmed Tristan's part of the scene, we got one single take before the camera started having issues. We learned it was related to the batteries. Like the camera was fine, but with off-brand batteries, do not recommend. So we she kind of begged us, like, can we please go back and can I do more takes of that scene? And I said, I hope so, and I would love for that to be the case, but I don't know that we'll have time in the schedule because I don't know how we would move something else around. So thankfully, when we looked at the footage, she nailed that one take, and that
That is
we
so
didn't need
lucky.
it. But it was very fortunate because usually, I mean, we have 7, 8 takes of most scenes. So one is scary. I mean, three okay, but one no.
I mean, with the
Oh,
cast, you mentioned Tristin Mays and obviously Jesse Metcalfe. I mean, their dynamic on set is incredible, and I know that obviously there is another relationship with Mike, the character Mike, and Brandon, but I love the dynamics between Mike and Alex. I mean, what went
yeah.
into casting these wonderful actors? Were you involved in that, or is it a case of
Yes.
it was an open audition, and then you know how
No,
hard was it to get the perfect Mike and Alex?
it was very difficult. What delayed the movie even filming until the winter when it was nice and cold and not the season that it was supposed to be, was trying to find our mic. So I don't want to go into all the people, but I will say that we offered Justin Long, and we imagined him for the role, and then he gave us a price that we just could not afford, and so then we kind of worked our way down our list, and it's not a list of order. It's like the best way to describe it is that a name pops in, the producers mention it, the casting director mentions it, and then we just go after that name. And then maybe if they say no, we pick another name. But there's no like starting list where you're like, we chose the eighth person on it. It doesn't really work that
Yeah.
way. And when we got Jesse, I mean, I was really excited because just knowing Jesse's career, and how high he was like during Desperate Housewives, right?
Mm.
Everybody knew who this guy was. I thought this guy's gonna understand Mike though. Like he's gonna grasp that concept of like I had this thing when I was younger and it was so big, and then what happened since then a little bit. And that's not to say that Jesse hasn't a good successful career. All I mean is that he's like anybody, he wants more. Like Jesse's very ambitious, he's very talented, and I think he knows that he belongs. Like yeah, I don't know why we can't see Jesse in like a Marvel movie or a DC movie or something like that.
I mean, he is
So
phenomenal. Jesse is phenomenal. There is one scene where he's on the floor and and Brandon's there, and it's just his acting is just phenomenal. You feel it in his face, in his eyes, and sometimes I think the best acting is the ones that's done without words, and you can tell by the
right.
expressions. And he does it beautifully, and so does Tristan, and it's just great to see. I mean, how did you manage the relationship between Mike and Brandon to make it look so authentic and real on screen? Because it was a
Yeah.
lovely sort of relationship, and I felt that it jumped off the screen for me. So
Yeah.
in the writing room, how do you balance things to make it so authentic?
First of all, I gonna mention that the scene that you said
Mm.
with Jesse sort of on the floor, that was actually shot early in the filming schedule, which kind of worried me because I wanted to warm up a bit and get
Mm.
into it, but we didn't really have the chance. So that scene, his performance was so good, even on the first take, and then we did it again a couple times. I had members of the cast and crew coming up to me. They just think Jesse Metcalfe, like Desperate Housewives, some Hallmark stuff or whatever. And I had people coming up to me going, "Wow, that was amazing! Like, I didn't know he had it in him." And it was powerful. Like every single person on set was clapping after that scene.
Mm.
It felt really cool to me as the director, just being part of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, as far as their relationship goes, I think it was a big thing trying to make sure that Micah, who played Brandon, had that chemistry. So we had him on a Zoom call, and when I had written the script too, I had really tried to make it a little playful, where Mike starts out kind of crotchety, annoyed at Brandon, and he just wants to be left alone. And so Brandon kind of has to pull him out of that. But he's shy a little bit himself. And so it kind of is a slowly developing thing where each of them realize, that they're going to be seeing each other because Brandon's going to show up at that comic shop whether Mike likes it or not. And then, he has something to offer where it's like, okay, this kid can maybe make me a new website. And so maybe it starts off like that, like a tit for tat, like Mike gets a website, Brandon gets him to help him illustrate. But it really develops into an actual friendship where these two just enjoy hanging out. And I think that Mike sees a lot of himself in Brandon, like when he was younger. That youthful enthusiasm that he's forgotten. And it is easy as we go on in life sometimes to get to a point where you forget that. And I hear people all the time talking about being older and wiser and wanting to learn from like older people. Sometimes for me, this is going to sound funny, I want to learn from 22-year-old Jonathan because he had that confidence and power that he was not going to be denied no matter what. And everybody could tell me it's not going to happen, and I wouldn't listen. So sometimes I want to tap into my older self, and that's what Mike can do with Brandon, is look at that youthful enthusiasm and say, where did that go? I need that back more.
And you see that journey take place throughout the film as well, where they both are getting sort of the help from each other, encouraging them. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And it's great to see the relationship with Brandon's character and his dad. I think that is really nice because I think that this is a type of film that I think that anyone that watches it will relate to someone or a situation in it because it's very well written and well put on the screen. Because sometimes things can be great on paper, but then when it's on screen, it's like, oh, does that work? So when you were making this, was there a moment, like a eureka moment, that you thought, do you know what? This is actually fantastic. This is going to be a really good film.
Yeah, I did. I had one moment where that really encouraged me to make the movie. I had sent the script to a bunch of screenwriting contests, and these things are a crapshoot, So I did have like half of them, I think. It didn't advance past the first round, but these are major contests. I didn't send a little contest. And then one of the contest writers said that every couple years a script like this comes along that's something special. And they just went and raved about the script. And that was the first feedback I'd gotten on any of my scripts where I really felt like they loved it, And so I thought maybe there's something here. I know it's just one person, but I made it to the second round in another screenwriting contest as well and got some good feedback. So when I saw that, I thought, I think I can take this and make it even better. The script changed between then and filming, but I thought there's something at least here that I can, dig my, teeth into. And when you mentioned Kurt, that was a big thing for me too, is in this movie, which is only 94 minutes long, how many characters can I give a true character arc and development? Mm-hmm. And so at least we got our two leads, Mike and Brandon both have full arcs. And I wanted for Brandon's dad to have an arc as well. I wanted for him to start the movie as this kind of like, he seems gruff, he seems not very supportive in a way of his son. But by the end, he's able to connect with him. And we actually learned that this guy had hopes and dreams too before joining the military. And then of all things, he was a musician. So he's really just trying to protect his son against disappointment that he faced. So I wanted to show that like sometimes the way other people act towards you isn't about you. It's about them and what they were going through. So I am hoping that with the movie, like you said, there's a lot to unpack and different characters to relate to. As an example, our first assistant director, his favorite character was Kurt, the dad. But my editor's favorite character is Alex. And probably my favorite character is Mike because I'm most like Mike. And somebody else's favorite character will be Brandon. So that's kind of what I was hoping, is that people could find different ways to access this and find something relatable in it.
And we talk about cameos, and there's some great cameos in this, from Carrot Top to a man I've seen on TV so many times. He's a magician, Murray.
Yes.
Sawchuk. Even in the UK, we know who that man is. But there is one man that I've had on this show, and he's an absolute gem. He should be in the Smithsonian right now, and that's Eric Roberts. How on earth did you get Eric Roberts? Because literally, he's like the busiest man, going.
Yeah.
His IMDb is incredible with the list of projects.
Yeah. So that's kind of a funny thing, because I didn't really initiate that as much as the casting director brought it to me and said, "Hey, would you like to have Eric Roberts in the movie?" And I mean, my response is kind of like, why wouldn't I want to have Eric Roberts? Is that an option? Like, I mean, what, tell me more. And so she's like, "Oh yeah, like he might be willing to do a cameo." And I was like, "Okay, well, let's do that." But I don't think we can afford it, really, can we? And then so we reached out to them, and his wife and manager, Eliza, was like, "Oh no, he's like, he wants to do it. He's affordable." And the craziest part is he sent us a video audition. Like, we wouldn't have made him audition for the scene. It's like, it's Eric Roberts. I mean, you can do this, But it was so cool, and I couldn't believe it. I pulled up the link. I didn't know what it was, and then I'm watching, and I'm like, no way. Even if we don't have him in the movie, I have an Eric Roberts audition of, like, him saying lines from my movie. So then when we got him in, it was really fun. I still think it's one of my favorite scenes in the film. And I think a really good example of, like, what acting brings to the table is the scene that he's in is a pretty boring, mundane scene. It really is just about Mike having a rent increase or lease increase for the store. It needs to happen. I had to have the scene, but it's not really written as a scene to be very fun or exciting. And so when Eric comes in and just brings his personality to this character in the scene, he crushes it and takes a scene that should have been one of the worst in the movie to actually being one of the best in the movie. So
and it's great, and the way he delivers it is just magical. I just love the man. I think he's fantastic. And you on your Instagram, you've got his book. I've actually ordered that book from America because that's the only way to get a signed book, and it's still on its way to me. And I'm like, so I can't wait to read it.
It's really good, and you have to check out page 223. Comic Shop gets mentioned. It's pretty cool, actually.
Excellent. And then the scene with Carrot Top as well. I thought that was hilarious. I mean, when you wrote that scene, was that scene how we see it, or did he bring some of himself to it?
What's funny is I didn't write the scene. It was totally improv. Like, once Brandon comes in, that's where the original scene starts, and there is no, there's no Carrot Top, there's no interaction. So when we got the cameo, which I love the idea because I wanted to make it Vegas-y. I wanted it to be like, this is the kind of thing that could happen in Las Vegas where Carrot Top performs. Maybe he's into comics and he goes to Mike's store all the time. And so I wanted it to play off like, it isn't even a big deal that Carrot Top is in here. It's just another Tuesday, And so Carrot Top came, and he was really nice. He's one of the nicest guys, and he's really funny. So he said, "Hey, if it's okay with you, I've got an idea for the scene." And of course, I have my own idea. His was very similar. And so he's like, "I just want to pretend like I'm a longtime customer, and like Mike has set aside these special books for me, and I'm really excited about it." And they said, "Oh yeah, okay, let's do it." And the first couple takes they did were so F this, F that. I mean, there was so much cussing, but we were all, cracking up. So one of the producers like runs over to me and he's like, get a safe take. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. But it was so funny though. And he's like, yeah, it was funny, but we can't, we got to have a version that's a little cleaner. And so, okay, all right. So we filmed a couple more, and we did end up using one of the cleaner takes in the movie. But I think it's still really, really funny, especially just the way it ends, like with Mike kind of warning him something's going to be expensive. And Carrot Top is worth about $70 million, so he doesn't really need to worry that much about money.
I just love the way he came in, and Mike is just like whispering to him, and I just thought it was genius. I thought it was very very well done. So
He was really
what advice do you think the comic shop gives to creatives struggling to follow their passions? Because I think that there is quite a strong message, along the line of this film, and it ends beautifully. But what advice do you think that this gives to other people that may be in the position of Mike? Either it be a comic book shop or a different type of job. What message do you feel it gives?
Yeah, so I really do think that one of the messages is like there's a quote that says you're never too old to be what you might have become, and that's kind of what I wanted people to take away is like don't wake up one day at 75 years old and think like, man, what would have happened if, or I wish I would have, because it's too late at that point. So don't think it's too late because you're 40 or 50. You still have a lot of time to go if you take care of yourself. And it's like I'm not saying the movie is like, look, quit your day job and go join a rock band at 47. Probably not. But
Well,
can you make time on the weekends, or can you make time during the nights? Even if you have a family and a job, can you carve out maybe 3 hours per week for yourself, something that you want to pursue passionately? Because I think it will make you feel more alive. I think it will put you back in touch with like what it is that you really wanted. What did you want when you were a teenager, or when you were 25 even, or 27? And that's kind of what Comic Shop is about, is encouraging people to take that leap and pursue their dreams, not stupidly or wildly, but in some capacity. We all have those things. It could be anything from being an architect to working with charities more, or like Mike being an illustrator, me a filmmaker. It isn't telling you what your dream should be. Just go after it, whatever it might be.
yeah, follow your passions, because this is why I relate to Mike quite a lot, because during the pandemic I had a business that I had to shut down because of the pandemic, and I've got a full-time job, but I'm a creative person, and I started this show just because I wanted to feed that creative mind. And literally, I've had some of the biggest stars in Hollywood, and it's great, and I'm really
So
enjoying it. And I've been to America a couple of times, and it's just fantastic. It really is. So people need to follow their passions, no matter how small or how big it is. I
oh that
mean,
yeah.
with this film, obviously it's not out yet. So, what is the plan? Is it to be confirmed? When can people see it, and how would they be able to see it?
Yeah, so the plan is basically, so it'll go to some streaming outlet, um, and it might start digital, so it might start something like iTunes and Amazon, where you can rent or buy it, and then it will trickle to some form of streaming, and it may go to a different form of streaming after that. Like I'll give you an example. There's a movie that called Fall. It's like a smaller indie film that I think it had about a 2 week theatrical release, and I missed it because I was seeing other things, and
It
I
is
really
it
want to
is the
see it.
most nerve-wracking film I've ever seen in my life. Is it the one with the
Oh,
two
it's
two two girls that are up that tower?
yeah, yeah, and I hate heights, so
Me too.
I remember like really wanting to see it, and so then it comes out on iTunes to rent it or buy it. I'm like, I don't really want to pay for it. Like I have so many streaming services. It's just got to wait for it. So then another like 9 months later, it comes to Stars, and I ended up actually signing up for Stars for that movie, which is hilarious because it's not even a big movie, but Stars had other good stuff too. So it's one of those where I'm hoping there'll be a path. So if somebody wants to see it right away, they'll be able to rent it or buy it.
Hmm.
If they don't want to really pay, they just want it to show up on a streaming service, we will make sure to eventually have that as well. Where all this stuff is in work and in progress. The best way to like kind of, I guess, keep updated. So I have directorbowen.com and also at directorbowen. on Instagram. So I will post any and all updates there that people can check out and follow it. Or I guess they can just Google search the comic shop periodically, but I would say expect it to be like mid-spring, you know?
What I'll do is I'll promise I will put all the links on the video below as they're watching it, and then once we get an update, I will update this video's description with all the links so people can actually see it, and I will share it on my socials as well. So with this all done, what is next for you? Have you got any projects that you can talk about that you're working on next?
Yeah, I have a couple scripts that I'm developing, a couple of ideas that I think could be next, but it's kind of like a this path or that path, depending on how Comic Shop does. And I've got other scripts that are finished as well. One of them I would love to have it be next, but I can't do it on the budget of the Comic Shop. It wouldn't necessarily be super expensive, but I'd probably need $4 or $5 million. And that's not something that I'm gonna, pony up. So, so it's kind of a matter of like getting these things ready, and I think it is important to have an answer. I think it is important that when you have a movie that you have at least some concept of what could be next. But I don't have a firm plan because I kind of need the comic shop to succeed well enough to be given that other opportunity, sort of like Mike in the movie. And there was always a little bit of humor to that because I knew that once I finished the movie, I've given Mike his happy ending. But the movie itself has to give me a happy ending where I get to go make a third movie.
Well,
so I'm still kind of waiting
fingers crossed. Well, fingers crossed.
Right.
It's a great film. You should be very proud of yourself. I give it a 5-star review. Honestly, it's an amazing film. I will do an official review and put it on our website and all our socials as well. And I just can't wait for people to watch it. And I can't wait to, fingers crossed, get some of the cast on as well. But Jonathan, you've been a great guest. Yeah. Look after yourself and keep safe.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on and checking it out and all the support. I really appreciate it. It means so much to me to make something that somebody connects with and enjoys.